Xbox Series X is doing some very special things with its memory and graphics processor. Let's get into it. What is going on, guys? Dealer back again with yet another video talking about the Series X. Of course we are, because hey, there is a lot to cover here. I get a ton of DMs every single week asking me to cover multiple aspects of this box. So of course there are new people on the channel every single week, and we've got to make some kind of recap here. Long story short, we talked about a feature that not even PC was leveraging at the moment. Now some of you say, who cares about load times, but do not get it twisted. This is not something like you get on PC today, at least not when it comes to gaming. Yes, games will load quick, but there's more to the story. It actually enhances the capability of the system at the graphics level. What, you're confused? Well, don't be, we'll explain it all here. And remember, we have a lot of people, especially on sites like Reset Era, trying to figure this out and saying, well, it's still not that quick. As I've said, it's in the implementation. I was told this directly by an engineer. The story goes beyond that of the speed of the SSD. It's all in the implementation, and we have all the information on that right here. We'd also talked about the tremendous graphics power that will be inside of the Xbox Series X, leading many into doubt as to if it could possibly be as powerful as they say. We'll trust that it is as capable as I've been saying, and I'll update you guys on the latest of what I'm hearing there involving architecture at the end of the video. Apologies for the extremely long preface there, but there is a lot of information here, a lot to cover, a lot of history. Remember, we've been covering this stuff and talking about these advanced load times and all this crazy stuff for months and months and months, but Digital Foundry, with their last video, I believe has set off the light bulb and pretty much figured out the implementation. And after checking into this, I believe Microsoft will go with a similar implementation. So shout out to Digital Foundry. While I've covered the flexible RAM, I've told you that the live game assets would be stored in the SSD. All of these things, I think they have figured out the implementation. I have never actually covered this before on the channel. So how will they do it? How will they not only store multiple different save states of different games simultaneously so you can pick them up whenever you want with no loading? How will they increase the available amount of RAM in the system? How will they actually decrease load times to as little as 3 to 5 seconds? And yes, that's on big load hefty games. I've shown this in action on my channel, check it out. How will they do what really quite simply hasn't been done before in gaming? Well, imagine a world where they take a GPU, or rather an APU. They then take an NVMe solid state drive and superglue it to the GPU. Yes, that's how they're going to do it.
Raja Koduri revealed an RX Vega workstation card that didn't just ship with HBM2 memory, but also an onboard 2TB SSD. Yes, an SSD connected directly to the GPU.
So not only does the next generation Xbox have a ridiculous bandwidth increase of over 40 times that of current generation, they will be rocking what Digital Foundry suggests and what I have come to believe: an NVMe SSD inserted directly into the graphics processor itself, or at least on the same piece of circuitry. Naturally, this would speed up data between the GPU and the actual SSD itself. And since the GPU in a console is obviously part of an APU, you bring all of that memory that much closer to the entire SoC. The benefits stack. And as I've said before several times in videos of the past, you can then store live game assets inside of the SSD. And with this method, this is a very effective virtual memory pool. Right now we're hearing 16 gigabytes for the Series X. Some are concerned, but remember, this virtual pool allows developers to expand this. Now, about 4 or 5 months ago, we had talked about having anywhere from a 32 to 64 gigabyte partition of an SSD for live game assets, a scenario where the entire game could be in RAM space itself. Now, of course, this does include both internal physical memory and virtual RAM. This would help explain some of the things I was hearing at the time around E3. Now, the question was, how much of this SSD would they allot? How much would they scale for this big cache for games? Well, they've done one better with this implementation by inserting this NVMe directly into the graphics processor, or at least close by. Technically, every game that is installed on the internal drive of Series X is, in fact, in some kind of system memory. Technically, at least that's what I would think. Though I am hearing there could be a drawback to this, and we'll cover that after. In the meantime, imagine that you are playing some kind of next generation Resident Evil, and we'll use Resident Evil 2 footage in its place. Well, Resident Evil 5000 loves memory, and in fact, it's already consumed the what is probably 13 gigabytes locally available for Series X games. But, and this is what's so awesome about it, since your game is installed on the internal, which is the drive that they have placed near the processor or on the processor, depending on how this implementation is going to work, the software involved, it technically is installed in the virtual memory pool of the console. Now, we don't know if developers will have to queue the game up or cycle assets or anything like that for any kind of partition, but we do know it is extremely interesting. And as Richard points out, it actually has been done to an AMD workstation card, where they would essentially glue this super quick SSD to the actual card itself. You would actually have more RAM space and could handle more things. This is, in fact, where the visual fidelity improvements come in, because when you expand your RAM pool, you can obviously hold more detail, more assets, higher resolution, better draw distance. The list goes on and on.
The workstation card here utilizes that technology to make some seriously impressive stuff happen. This light field rendering demo uses extreme detail assets that bust beyond the limits of HBM2, and you can see on the right here what happens when you don't have enough memory available.
Microsoft have found a way to easily and quickly exchange assets in real time from system memory to hard drive with almost no delay. That makes all of this possible, and as I said at the beginning of the video, it is the implementation, not the raw speed of the drive itself. Currently, there is no 1080 or 2080 Ti or even probably what will be a 3080 Ti that does this. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do say that to point out that this is doing something that graphics cards on the PC side are not doing, whereas there is a workstation card that actually has done this before. That card, by the way, is $7,000 and is not for gaming. So yes, a rather ingenious plan to fit games in a very quick cache of virtual memory at all times. Like I said, whether or not they are always in virtual memory or if it matters where they are cached or stored within the SSD, I do not know. But it's a very interesting plan, makes perfect sense, has been shown to work on desktop class cards, at least when it comes to professional workloads, and I think you'll definitely see this or a version of it in all next generation consoles. Now, something else that I'm hearing about is the negative involving this super quick setup, the fact that you will not be able to get that same experience when loading games from an external. This is something else that we have covered on this channel because a lot of gamers, let's face it, have a ton of external drives, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games. They need terabytes and terabytes of data, and unfortunately they end up playing off of those external drives more often than not. How many people will spend how much time actually experiencing the biggest feature of the box? Well, again, as of right now, from what I'm told, it's not quite the cohesive experience Microsoft want. They are not able to leverage those load times using externals, though it will be much faster and likely no longer bottlenecked by USB 3.0. If you've got a nice quick external SSD, you can get really quick load times even still. Combine that with the speed of the internal components, but it will not load things like the box's internal drive, so you will be cycling drives often. That transfer of data will be much faster if you plan on doing that. I really do recommend buying nothing but SSDs going forward. A much more future-proof drive, a much faster drive, plug that into what will likely be USB-C. You've got some quick load times there. If you can afford it, I would recommend it. So that's how I think they plan on doing this. That's how Digital Foundry suggests they may do this. Let me know if you agree down below. I think it's a great idea. Props again to Digital Foundry. Now, when it comes to next generation architecture for the next gen consoles, it is almost certainly some kind of hybrid architecture. For instance, the Xbox One X is Polaris based, but it has some Vega features like Delta color compression. Right now, and of course take this with a grain of salt, I'm just telling you what I'm hearing early, and every single day something new is brought to my attention, but it is a pretty good source. Hearing RDNA 2 Those of you that know your stuff know what that means. Now, for those of you saying, of course, it's RDNA 2, ray tracing, etc., blah, 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 I want to remind you that, again, hybrid architectures are often a thing. It is more than possible for them to offer something that's a bit older with some newer stuff added in, as I had mentioned about the Xbox One X. But, again, I'm hearing RDNA 2. I'll let those in the comments elaborate on that stuff as well. We will see. 56 CUs at around 1700 megahertz would get us up to about 12 T-flops, whereas Sony might be using less CUs but at a higher frequency. When thinking about this, I thought it was a bit odd considering that the Series X is going to cool itself very well and be quiet while it does it, meaning there is thermal overhead to ramp those clocks even higher. So why not do it? Or why not cut down on the silicon, which is really what costs the money to produce, and ramp the frequencies higher? There are still so many questions to be answered, just letting you into my mindset right now, currently what I'm thinking about. Let me know what you are thinking about down below. Honestly, guys, you should be very excited for this. This is different. This is new. This has not even been done on PC, at least if these load times that I have already talked about, covered, and shown are actually true, if they're accurate. Again, I just wouldn't write this stuff off. In fact, the bandwidth inside of the next-gen consoles is so ridiculously quick that Microsoft and Sony will hinge all of their marketing on this. Graphics power and load times, or rather the lack of. In fact, it is one of the biggest investments they have put into the Series X, this 40 times boost to I/O speeds. If you do recall, a few weeks ago, I had revealed that developers, as of what I know, will not be mandated to make games for older Xboxes. That is simply Microsoft's slogan. That's what they plan to do. However, developers are required to make games for both next generation Xboxes, one of them not announced yet, if they want to make games for one. It will work similarly to how it will with PlayStation. Third parties are not mandated to make PS5 only games. In fact, if Sony have a PS5 Pro, they will likely have the same mandate as Microsoft. To make a PS5 game, you have to make a PS5 Pro version of the game too. What am I trying to say? Well, I'm saying you never know what systems developers will make games for. Day one, you could see exclusive titles from third parties. And on those games you'll be playing on the system, you'll be using things like GPU paging to resume and suspend games simultaneously. Yes, there's supposed to be a rather large bank of games you can suspend and resume, and as we had covered on RDX Podcast several weeks ago, it'll likely just dump that stuff into the SSD and jump back to it when you need it. So again, let me know your thoughts down below. A ton of information in this video. Of course, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it all. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, maybe learn something today. Of course, share this with a buddy or two. It really helps more than you know. You guys make this channel what it is. Please subscribe if you haven't. Hit that bell button. Maybe get some notifications going on. And of course, check out the links down below for the source and more. Shout out to the patrons. You guys do so much for this channel. Thank you so much. Shout out to the channel members. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys on RDX Podcast New Year's Eve. And I really appreciate those of you who made it to this point. Again, I'm Dealer. I'm out.